Imagine waking up in 9th century Scandinavia to the sound of your husband sharpening his axe. Not for wood chopping, but because he's leaving on a raid that might last 6 months, and you're about to spend the next 18 hours doing backbreak Engler. That would make a modern construction worker quit on the spot. You think being a Viking woman meant sitting around weaving while the men had all the adventures. Think again. Viking women were expected to run entire households, manage farms with dozens of animals, negotiate with hostile neighbors, and even defend their homes with weapons when raiders came calling. And that was just a Tuesday. Today, we're going to walk through a single day in the life of a Viking woman named Astrid. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why even the strongest modern woman would struggle to survive just 24 hours in her world. So get comfortable, because this is going to be a long, detailed look at one of history's most challenging lives. Welcome to the year 875 CE, somewhere in what we now call Norway. The sun barely sets during these summer months, casting everything in an eerie, endless twilight. You are Astrid, a 28-year-old Viking woman, which makes you practically elderly. By the standards of your time, most women your age are either dead from childbirth or worn down to nothing by the relentless demands of Viking life. Your husband Bjorn left 3 weeks ago with 20 other men to raid the coasts of England. You have no idea if he's alive or dead, and honestly, you're too busy to worry about it. You have 4 children to feed, 12 cows to milk, a household of 7 people to manage, and about 1,000 other responsibilities that would overwhelm a modern woman with all her experiences. The longhouse you call home is a single room, roughly 60 feet long and 20 feet wide, shared with your children, your elderly mother-in-law, 2 slaves, and whatever animals need shelter from the harsh weather. Privacy doesn't exist. Personal space is a luxury you've never even imagined. The smell is ... indescribable. Unwashed bodies, animal waste, rotting food scraps, and the ever-present smoke from the central fire pit all combine into an aroma that would make a modern person vomit instantly. But you're so accustomed to it, you don't even notice anymore. The brutal AWAKN giants, roughly 4 a.m. by modern standards. Though time means nothing to you beyond the position of the sun. You wake up on a straw mattress that's more lice than straw at this point, covered by a rough woolen blanket that scratches your skin raw. Your youngest child, barely 2 years old, is crying from hunger. Your back aches from yesterday's labor. And you can already hear the cows lowing in distress because they need to be milked. There's no snooze button in Viking life. There's no lying in bed, checking your phone. There's certainly no coffee to ease you into consciousness. You simply wake up and immediately begin working, because every minute of daylight is precious, and winter is always coming. Your first task is to rekindle the fire that's been smoldering all night. If this fire goes out, everyone in your household could die of cold, even in summer. The process of starting a fire from scratch with flint and steel could take an hour. Time you don't have, so you carefully nurture the coals back to life, feeding them dry grass and small twigs until flames appear. The smoke immediately fills the windowless room, making your eyes water and your lungs burn. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets out maybe half the smoke. The rest settles into your lungs, your clothing, your hair. By modern standards, you're essentially living in a smoking chamber, slowly being cured like a piece of meat. While the fire builds, you wake your oldest daughter, Sigrid. It's barely 10 years old, but already responsible for watching the younger children. In Viking society, childhood ends around age 7. From that point on, you're expected to contribute meaningful labor to the household's survival. Your mother-in-law, Ingrid, is already awake, of course. She's been up for an hour, silently judging your every move. In Viking culture, the mother-in-law has absolute authority over her son's wife, and Ingrid never lets you forget it. She criticizes your cooking, your child-rearing, your housekeeping, and pretty much everything else you do. But you can't say a word back, because disrespecting your elders is one of the worst crimes in Viking society. The 2 slaves your husband captured on his last raid are stirring as well. Their names were Eric and Thora, but now they're just thrall. Property no different from the livestock. They sleep on the bare ground near the animals, and their lives are entirely in your hands. If they displease you, you can beat them, sell them, or even kill them with no legal consequences whatsoever. Asterisk, 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 V. Endless grinding. Now comes the morning milking, a task that would break most modern people's backs before noon. You have 12 cows, and each one needs to be milked by hand. Twice a day, every single day, regardless of weather, illness, or any other circumstances. Miss even one milking and the cow could get mastitis and die, taking a crucial source of food and wealth with her. Viking cows are not like modern dairy cows. They're smaller, more aggressive, and produce maybe a quarter of the milk. They also haven't been bred for docility, so getting kicked, trampled, or gored is a constant danger. You've got scars up and down your arms from cow horns and hooves, and one finger that never healed properly after a particularly angry heifer stepped on it. The milking has to be done in a specific order. Because Viking cows have established hierarchies, and milking them out of order can lead to fighting that could injure or kill your livestock. You know each cow's personality, her moods, her preferred side for milking, and exactly how to approach her without getting attacked. Each cow produces maybe 2 gallons of milk, if you're lucky. This milk is literally liquid gold. It's one of your primary sources of nutrition, and any surplus can be traded for other necessities. But first, it has to be processed immediately because there's no refrigeration. Some gets drunk fresh, some gets churned into butter, some gets turned into cheese, and some gets allowed to sour into skyr, a fermented dairy product that can last for months. The butter-making process alone would exhaust a modern person. You pour the fresh milk into a large wooden churn, then spend the next hour violently shaking it up and down until the fat separates from the liquid. Your arms burn, your back screams in protest, and sweat pours down your face, but you can't stop because butter is one of your most valuable trade goods. While you're churning butter, you're also supervising your children, who are doing their own back-breaking labor. Your 10-year-old daughter is feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, and trying to prevent the roosters from attacking her. Your 8-year-old son is hauling water from the well, bucket by bucket, a task that would challenge many modern adults. Your 6-year-old is watching the youngest child while also spinning wool into thread on a hand spindle. The well is over 100 yards from your longhouse, because it had to be dug in a specific location where the water table was accessible. The buckets are made of wood and hold maybe 2 gallons each, and they weigh over 20 pounds when full. Your son makes this trip 12 times before noon, carrying over 240 pounds of water total, just so your household can survive one day. Meanwhile, you're also tending to the other livestock. The sheep need to be moved to fresh pasture, which means walking them over a mile to new grazing ground, then walking back. The pigs need to be fed slop made from kitchen scraps and whatever edible plants you can forage. The chickens require constant supervision because hawks, foxes, and other predators are always trying to steal them. And through all of this, you're pregnant. Again, this is your 6th pregnancy in 8 years of marriage. 2 of your children died in infancy, one from a fever, one from what was probably dysentery. But there's no birth control, no family planning. And Viking men expect their wives to produce as many children as possible to ensure the family line continues. Your body is essentially a baby-making machine that also happens to do the work of 5 modern people. Household management and survival by what we would call noon. You've already put in a full day's work by modern standards. But for a Viking woman, the day is just getting started. Now comes the truly complex part, managing the household economy that keeps everyone alive. First, you need to check on the food stores. Vikings don't have grocery stores, restaurants, or food delivery. Everything your family eats either comes from your farm, your husband's raids, or careful trading with neighbors. Running out of food doesn't mean going hungry for a day. It means watching your children slowly starve to death over the course of a brutal winter. Your food storage system would horrify any modern health inspector. Meat is preserved by smoking it over the central fire, covering it in salt, or burying it in special pits where the cold ground keeps it from rotting too quickly. Vegetables are dried and stored in leather bags that rats and mice constantly try to break into. Grain is kept in large pottery vessels that have to be carefully sealed to prevent moisture and pests. You spend an hour each day checking these stores, looking for signs of spoilage, pest damage, or other problems. A single discovery of mold or rot could mean the difference between life and death come winter. When you find spoiled food, you can't just throw it away. Waste of any kind is a luxury you can't afford. Moldy grain gets fed to the pigs. Slightly rotten meat gets cooked into stew with extra herbs to mask the taste. Nothing, absolutely nothing, gets discarded if it has any possible use. Then comes the weaving, which is not the peaceful, meditative activity modern people imagine. Viking women were expected to produce all the cloth their households needed: clothing, blankets, sails for boats, and trade goods. This meant spending hours every day hunched over a loom, working with rough wool that cuts your fingers and makes your hands bleed. The wool itself comes from your sheep, which you sheared by hand using iron knives. Then you had to clean it, removing dirt, burrs, insects, and sheep dung by hand. Next came the combing, using metal combs with teeth so sharp they regularly drew blood from your fingers. Then the spinning, turning the raw wool into thread using a spindle and whirl, a process that requires constant attention and perfect timing. Finally, the actual weaving done on a massive vertical loom that takes up a quarter of your living space. The threads have to be kept at perfect tension. The patterns must be memorized and executed flawlessly. And the work has to continue for weeks or months to produce a single piece of cloth. Make a mistake, and you've wasted months of work and materials your family can't afford to lose. But today, you're not weaving your dyeing cloth you finished last week. Viking dyes come from plants, insects, and minerals that you have to gather, process, and prepare yourself. The red dye comes from madder root that you dug up, cleaned, and dried. The blue comes from woad plants that you fermented in urine for weeks until they produced the right chemical compounds. Yes, urine, human urine, which you and your family have been collecting and storing for this purpose. The dyeing process involves boiling water over your central fire, adding the dye materials, then carefully dipping the cloth and stirring it for hours to achieve even coloration. The fumes from the boiling dyes make you dizzy and nauseous, but you can't stop, because this cloth will be traded for iron tools that your family desperately needs. While you're dyeing cloth, you're also supervising the food preparation for the day's main meal. Viking cooking is not like modern cooking. It's a complex process of making the most nutritious meal possible from whatever ingredients you have available, while being careful not to waste a single scrap of food. Today's meal centers around a lamb that broke its leg yesterday and had to be slaughtered. Nothing from this animal can be wasted. The meat gets roasted over the fire and turned into stew. The blood gets mixed with oats to make blood sausage. The bones get cracked open so you can extract the marrow. The hide gets scraped clean and prepared for tanning into leather. Even the hooves get boiled down to make glue. The vegetables come from your garden, which you maintain in addition to all your other responsibilities. Viking gardens are not the neat, orderly plots modern people envision. They're chaotic spaces where you grow whatever will survive the harsh climate. Onions, cabbage, turnips, and various herbs for cooking and medicine. The soil is rocky and poor, so every plant requires careful tending and protection from the animals that want to eat them. Harvesting vegetables means digging them up by hand, often in mud that comes up to your ankles. Cleaning them means scrubbing off dirt with your bare hands in cold water that makes your fingers go numb. Preparing them for cooking means chopping with iron knives that are nowhere near as sharp as modern kitchen tools, the bread you're making. Today requires grain that you harvested last autumn, threshed by hand, winnowed to remove the chaff, and ground into flour using a hand-powered quern stone. The grinding alone takes 2 hours of constant physical labor, turning a heavy stone wheel that wears down your arms and shoulders. The flour you produce is coarse and full of grit that will gradually wear down your teeth, but it's the only bread you'll get. Defense and violence around what modern people would call 2 p.m. Your relatively peaceful day is interrupted by your lookout system, your 8-year-old son, who's been posted on the roof to watch for threats. He shouts down that he can see dust. Clouds on the horizon, which could mean travelers, traders, or raiders heading toward your settlement. This is where Viking life becomes truly terrifying for modern sensibilities. In the absence of your husband and the other warriors, the defense of your household falls entirely on you. You're not just a farmer, mother, and household manager. You're also a warrior who might have to kill other human beings to protect your children. You immediately begin the defense preparations that every Viking woman knows by heart. First, you send your oldest daughter to hide the youngest children in the secret underground chamber you dug beneath your longhouse. This chamber is barely big enough for 2 small children, has no light and limited air. But it's their only chance of survival if armed raiders attack. Next, you gather your weapons. Yes, weapons. Viking women were expected to be proficient with spears, axes, and knives, not just for hunting, but for combat. Your spear is 8 feet long with an iron tip that you've personally sharpened dozens of times. Your axe is the same tool you use for chopping wood, but it's perfectly capable of splitting a human skull. Your knife is always at your side, as much for protection as for the countless cutting tasks that fill your days. Your elderly mother-in-law takes position near the back of the longhouse with a bow and arrow. Don't let her age fool you. She's been defending Viking households for 50 years, and she can still put an arrow through a man's eye at 30 yards. The 2 slaves are given spears and told that if they fight well, they might earn better treatment. If they run or betray you, they'll be killed immediately. The approaching group turns out to be traitors rather than raiders. But the relief you feel is mixed with disappointment. Trading opportunities are rare and precious, but they're also dangerous. Negotiations where a single mistake could cost you everything your family owns. Viking trading is not like going to a store or browsing an online marketplace. It's a complex social and economic ritual, where you're constantly trying to assess whether the strangers you're dealing with are honest traders or scouts for a raiding party that will return later to rob and kill you. The traders have come from Denmark, traveling for 3 weeks to reach your settlement. They have iron tools, amber jewelry, silk cloth from distant lands, and other luxury goods that would make your life easier and demonstrate your family's wealth to your neighbors. But they want payment in silver, livestock, or other goods that represent months of your family's labor. The negotiation process takes hours. Every item has to be examined for quality, tested for authenticity, and evaluated for its true worth. The iron tools might be made from inferior metal that will break. After a few uses, the silk might be cleverly woven wool dyed to look more expensive. The amber might be fake resin designed to fool inexperienced buyers. Meanwhile, you have to feed these traders according to Viking hospitality customs, which require you to provide the best food and drink your household can offer. This means slaughtering one of your precious chickens, breaking into your stores of preserved meat and serving your finest ale. The cost of this hospitality represents several days of your family's food. But failing to provide it would mark you as a poor host and damage your family's reputation. The traders also bring news from the wider world, information that could be crucial to your family's survival. They tell you about other raiding parties in the area, changes in political alliances between various kings, and weather patterns that might affect this year's harvest. You have to carefully evaluate this information because traders are notorious for spreading false rumors to manipulate prices or set up their victims for future raids. After 6 hours of negotiation, you manage to trade 2 of your sheep for a new iron knife, a small piece of silver, and some glass beads that will help. Arrange a marriage for your daughter when she comes of age. By modern standards, this seems like a terrible deal. But in Viking society, it's a successful transaction that will benefit your family for years to come. Asterisk, 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 spiritual duties and community obligated munes. This is the sun begins its brief descent toward the horizon, though it won't truly set for another month. Your attention turns to the spiritual responsibilities that are just as crucial as your physical labor. Viking religion is not like modern worship services that happen once a week in a specific building. It's a constant series of rituals, offerings, and ceremonies that require daily attention and could mean the difference between divine favor and supernatural catastrophe. Tonight is the new moon, which means you need to make offerings to ensure the protection of your household while your husband is away raiding. This involves preparing a specific meal for the gods, using ingredients that your family can barely spare but must sacrifice anyway. You slaughter your best rooster, the one you've been saving for breeding, because the gods demand quality offerings, not leftover scraps. The ritual preparation takes 2 hours. The rooster must be killed in a specific way, with prayers spoken at exact moments during the process. The blood must be collected in a consecrated bowl and sprinkled around your property. Boundaries to create a protective barrier. The meat must be cooked according to ancient traditions that have been passed down through generations of Viking women. While the offering cooks, you gather sacred herbs from the special grove near your settlement. This involves a dangerous walk through territory where wolves, bears, and human enemies could be lurking. You carry your spear and move carefully, listening for any sounds that might indicate threats. The herbs you're collecting, mugwort, juniper, and vervain, only grow in specific locations and can only be gathered during certain moon phases. Back at your longhouse, you burn these herbs in the sacred fire while chanting prayers that you learned from your mother, who learned them from her mother, going back countless generations. The smoke from these herbs is believed to carry your prayers to the gods and bring their protection down upon your household. Getting the words wrong or performing the ritual incorrectly could bring divine punishment that might kill your entire family. The spiritual work is interrupted by a visit from your neighbor, Ragnhild, whose husband is also away raiding. She brings disturbing news. Her livestock have been showing signs of disease, and she's worried that malevolent spirits or enemy magic might be targeting your settlement. In Viking belief systems, unexplained misfortunes are often attributed to supernatural causes that require immediate action. Together, you and Ragnhild perform a protective ritual that involves walking the boundaries of both your properties, while carrying iron tools and chanting ward spells. This 2-mile walk takes place in near darkness, over rough terrain where a single misstep could result in a broken ankle or worse. But the spiritual protection it provides is considered essential for your families survival. The evening also brings community obligations that you cannot ignore. A neighbor's child has been showing signs of fever and is one of the more experienced women in the settlement. You're expected to provide medical care. Viking medicine is a combination of herbal remedies, ritual healing, and practical treatments that would horrify modern medical professionals. You prepare a tea from willow bark to reduce the child's fever. Create a poultice from ground herbs to draw out the sickness and perform a healing chant that's designed to drive away the evil spirits causing the illness. The child's recovery depends entirely on these treatments. There are no doctors, hospitals, or modern medications available. The medical work requires you to stay up most of the night, monitoring the child's condition and adjusting the treatments as needed. You catch maybe 2 hours of sleep between checking on the patient, maintaining the healing fire, and ensuring that the protective rituals remain effective. The cycle CONTOs as the sun makes its minimal dip toward the horizon, never quite setting during these summer months. You finally return to your longhouse for what passes as rest in Viking society. But even sleep brings no true relief from the demands of your existence. The sleeping arrangements in your longhouse would be unbearable for modern people. 12 individuals, you, your 4 children, your mother-in-law, 2 slaves, and several animals all share the same 60-foot space. Privacy doesn't exist. Personal space is unknown. The sounds, smells, and movements of 11 other beings surround you constantly. Your bed is a pile of straw covered with rough woolen blankets that you wove yourself. The straw is full of insects, fleas, lice, and various beetles that bite and crawl on your skin throughout the night. The blankets are scratchy and provide minimal warmth, but they represent months of labor and are among your most valuable possessions. Sleep, self, is fitful and constantly interrupted. Your youngest child needs feeding every few hours. The animals make noise throughout the night. The central fire requires periodic attention to keep it alive. And always, there's the awareness that raiders, wolves, or other threats could attack at any moment. But perhaps most exhausting of all is the mental burden that never leaves you. You carry the responsibility for keeping your entire household alive until your husband returns, if he returns. You have to plan for winter, manage complex trading relationships, maintain spiritual protections, resolve disputes, provide medical care, and make dozens of life or death decisions every single day. The statistics are sobering. The average life expectancy for a Viking woman is about 35 years. Many die in childbirth. Others succumb to diseases that would be easily treatable today. Some are killed in raids or accidents. The few who survive to old age are worn down to almost nothing by the relentless physical demands of their lives. And yet, somehow, you and women like you built one of history's most successful warrior cultures. Your labor made possible the Viking raids that terrorized Europe. Your management skills enabled the exploration and settlement of Iceland, Greenland, and North America. Your strength and resilience created the foundation upon which an entire civilization was built. As you finally drift off to sleep, your last thought is about tomorrow. The cows will need milking again. The children will need feeding. The endless cycle of survival will continue. And you'll face it all again because you have no choice and because somehow, impossibly, you're strong enough to endure what would break a modern person in hours. This is why you wouldn't last a day as a Viking woman. Not because you lack courage or intelligence, but because the sheer physical, mental, and emotional demands of this life require a kind of strength that our comfortable modern world has never forced us to develop. Sleep well, knowing that your ancestors lived through challenges that would seem impossible today.